This is a continuation of what we were working on the other day, where you're wrapping the line around the form. So just to remind you guys, form is something that is 3D. It is not 2D like a shape would be. So we're trying to indicate that this has some kind of volume or mass. And I'm doing that just through a slightly curved line. And those little marks, they're not perfectly even. There are some that are higher than others, and they're varied. But they do give a sense of curving around that tree trunk. In fact, some trees actually have lines like that on them. And you're going to be doing that to anywhere you have some kind of mass or form. You don't have to do it to every single one. I'm just doing it to the main ones, the main branches. But you could also do this to kind of a rock face if you have a rock in there as well. You can put in a little bit of cross hatching just to indicate some shadows, but that's optional. At this stage, you're going to take a fat eraser and erase out any pencil marks that you have. We're just kind of cleaning up the surface, getting ready to apply the ink wash all over. Here's a little bit of a review on mixing your values for your wash. So you want to pour water in to almost every well, except for the last one. You'll just leave that one empty. Ideally, you want to pour less water as you go, but then you're going to start to apply ink. And I'm doing it with the dropper. The dropper is pretty easy to control. And you want to make sure that you're getting different values. Ideally, you want to try and do it incrementally. So like the first one is your lightest, the second one is your second lightest, but I can never manage that, so it's all over the place. But I do want to keep track in my mind which one is the lightest shade, which one is a darker shade, and then I use a test paper. That test paper helps me to figure out which one is the lightest, which one is the next darkest, which one is the next one up. You want to ideally have 6 very different values, just like what you were doing on the value scale. You want them to look all different. Here is what our brushes look like. They are delicate. They're made out of a bamboo stem, or they may be kind of plastic made to look like bamboo. And then the hair is natural hair, so it's actual real fur. That creates a really nice soft brush, and you want to pinch it to a point. While you're using the brush, you may need to continue to pinch it back into a point and shape it every now and then. So it does mean like getting a little bit of ink on your fingers, but true artists don't mind getting a little bit dirty. So I'm just going to show you, like, there are different ways of holding this brush. Like I told you before with the pencil, I hold my brush farther back, and I'd like you to do the same thing with yours. So you can, if your brush is pinched in a point, you can get a very precise line that way. But you could also turn this brush sideways and get a very wide, almost out of control line. So I'm just going to show you a couple techniques, and I'm using different flavors of that wash, so I'm getting different values there. So right now I'm using the point, but in a little bit I'm going to use the broader side of the brush. Using the brush is very freeing and kind of like liberating, but you also have the risk of losing control of your brush. It's a little bit more loosey-goosey than like a precise point like you had with the Micron pens. So right there I just used the side of the brush. I was blotting with my finger. Blotting is when you take a paper towel or your finger and you just touch it to get it to go lighter. And how you hold your brush matters in terms of the stroke. So I twist with my wrist a lot when I'm using a brush to get it to go different angles. And I'm just really messing around. This is fun stuff. If you want to mess around too, I have paper that you can do that on. A lot of artists will do traditional like Chinese brush painting or Japanese brush painting with this type of tool, and I'm just doing a bamboo just to show you how, like a stalk of bamboo. So there's the narrow part of the brush, and then I'm just going to drag it. And mine's a little bit drippy because I'm actually working with the paper upright, so I'm working vertical. So how you lay the brush down and make contact with the paper is very important. If you drag it sideways like a mop, you'll get a big line. I'm dragging it up. You see how that motion? I can control that a little bit more than a sideways sweep. But you're going to have to experiment. You'll have to play around with it, see if you can go from thick to thin. Like I said, I have paper if you want to practice doing this before you actually apply it to your painting. But it can be very fun, and part of the fun is seeing what happens. This is more of a dry brush technique where I don't have a lot of ink on the paper. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and apply that to our drawing. All right, so here's the drawing, and I'm going to the sky first. I'm going to ignore all the branches and paint in between them. And you really need to look at your sky in relationship to the other objects in the piece. So on mine, it's darker at the top, kind of fades down towards the bottom. In general, that's what you're going to see on most skies. You're going to see it darker at the top, and as it moves down towards the horizon line, it should get paler as it goes down. Not always true, but almost always. So the good thing is you can go back in after it's dried and adjust it if you need to. Like let's say, for instance, I didn't go dark enough on the top of the sky. I can go back in later. So once the sky is done, I'm going to the shadows. And I'm doing this in time lapse so you don't have to watch me laboriously paint. So I go sky first, then shadows. I'm not using pure ink. I'm using a little bit of a wash there. And there's kind of a hierarchy of dark to light, and I'm looking at that hierarchy. Where is it darkest? Where is the next darkest? Where is the mid-tone? Where is the lighter shades? Mid-tone means the medium grays. You do want to use the white of the paper. That's important too. You want to pop those lights out, and the only way you're going to do that is by keeping that paper blank in certain parts. You do want to try and get a feeling of 3D if you can make that happen. So dark to medium to light. Especially on like a tree trunk and branches, you have a cylinder shape essentially. And this can look very cool. This almost looks illustrative when you see it like this. And I am trying to get in a little bit of the texture of the bark. I'm using the point of the brush to get the texture. When I'm laying in the big values though, I'm using more of the side of the brush, or I'm dragging it down or up to get a wider mark. You want to be able to control your mark. When you're holding a tool like a pencil or a graphite pencil or a paintbrush, you want to try and feel that point that you're using. So in this case, it's the brush hairs that you want to actually kind of feel that through your fingertips. It's like the brush is an extension of your fingertips. I know that sounds weird, but you want to start developing sensitivity so you can have more control. Like you're pushing your own energy through that paintbrush to the tip. As far as pressure goes, you don't want to have a whole lot of pressure on your brush. You're not pushing it on like you would push graphite pencil like onto a paper. You just want to gently nudge it. So you're not using a lot of force. Your hand should be pretty loose. It should be so loose that I can pull your paintbrush out of your hand if I were to sneak up behind you. And keep looking at your picture. You can see my picture is posted right up next to my drawing, right where I'm working. That way I don't have to look as far from my reference picture to the picture I'm using, or to the drawing. And those of you who are familiar with watercolor, this is going to be way easy for you. It's like you're working with watercolor, except for it's just black and white. So this should be really fun, really cool. If you're struggling at all, just ask for help. I'm happy to help you.